dressing like a civilized human being. Be happy to see. And I'm preaching again. No flip-flops for me tonight. Excited to teach again tonight. We're going to get back into the Beatitudes, to the Sermon on the Mount. So if you want to go ahead and in your Bible apps or in your Bibles, go ahead and turn back to Matthew 5. We're going to dive in. We're not going to get very far. There's so much in each of these verses. Yeah, there's notes. If you need notes, raise your hand, and Caleb and other ushers. Actually, there's multiple Calebs ushering. Find a Caleb, and they'll get you some notes. Let's just go ahead and start with, let's read the Beatitudes, and then we'll do a quick review and just dive right into these notes. So let's go to Matthew 5, and we'll go ahead and start at verse 1. We'll go down to 12. So it says, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Jim, I missed you last week. All the extra chatter is appreciated. I appreciate it. Encourages me. Feel free, talk to me. Amen. Whatever you want to do. Or hallelujah, yes. So last week we kind of just did a quick overview of the Sermon on the Mount and Beatitudes. So just, a few of you weren't here last week, just really quick. So the Beatitudes are this whole section, the blessed are's, all the blessed are's. That's actually all the word beatitude means. It comes from something to do with Latin. That's nothing to do with attitude, even though you could see attitudes in there. That actually comes from a Latin phrase that means blessed are, is why they're called the Beatitudes. So each of them is structured, we talked about this last week, with this format of you do this now, and you receive this then. So blessed are you if you do this in this age, and this is what you will receive in the age to come. And we talked also about what this word blessing means. So the blessing that we receive really points to the blessed hope, which is talking about the future rewards that we receive when Jesus comes, is really what he's saying. So you could almost replace it with like resurrected are, like the kingdom will belong to these ones, like all of these amazing rewards that we get in the end. That's what this blessing is talking about. It's not like I'm going to get an extra paycheck this week if I'm meek. That's not what it's talking about. It's not like I'm going to, someone's going to give me something. Like, and God does bless us in those ways, but the blessing that's in view here is much bigger than temporal blessings. It's talking about the blessings that are coming when he returns. And then we dove into what it means to be poor in spirit. So to be poor in spirit, again, has to do with this way of looking at ourselves and seeing ourselves rightly, that we have nothing to offer, that apart from the Lord, we are utterly wicked to the core. It was a really encouraging message if you weren't here. But the Lord loves us even in that state, but that is actually the way he wants us to see ourselves rightly when we approach him, to know that apart from his work in his life and the Holy Spirit's maturing us, this is really who we are, that we are, like we used a couple illustrations of like a sheep to a shepherd, or like a small child to a father, is the way we are to look at him. Like a little child has nothing to offer. They're totally dependent upon their parents. They're totally dependent on their father for everything. It's this type of idea that we want to have, this idea of being poor in spirit, is seeing ourselves rightly, and very similar to humility. So now we're gonna dive into the next couple verses about mourning and meekness. So we're gonna start with mourning and dive into what I believe Jesus was talking about here. So again, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So letter A there says, being poor in spirit speaks of how we see ourselves, while mourning refers to how we feel about what we see. So it's the response to what we see in ourselves, but then it goes beyond that. It includes not only what we feel about what we see in ourselves, but also what we feel about what we see in our city, our nation, nations of the world, and all of creation, because the Genesis 3 curse has not yet been lifted. It's we see all of the destruction across the earth, and we should mourn. Like, we should not be okay with the way things are. I'm going to reference that song a few times tonight. If you guys don't know it, the things are not okay. Like, really, if you look across the world and see all of the things happening in the earth, and you're like, yeah, this is really what God wants. This is his final, what he desires for the world. Like, you're missing it. Like, this is not it. This is the earth screwed up by sin, and there is a day coming that will no longer be this way. We should not be content. And it's easy in the West. It's a lot harder to see things rightly. We're not over in Israel. We're not over in the Ukraine. We're not over in these different places where the church is being persecuted. But even just seeing the things that are happening in our own country, right? With all of the alphabet soup agenda and all the different, I can't get all the letters out. All the different agenda that's going on and all the different things that we see being pushed. Like, we have many, many things that really should lead us to grieving and mourning. And we mourn and we even feel pain, longing for things to be made right. I've prayed weird prayers like that. I'd be like, Lord, actually let me feel pain when I think about the way things are. And obviously you guys know I love to cry a lot. Like, Lord, let me cry more tears. I actually get really concerned when I don't cry as much. Like, I want to cry tears of longing for the Lord to return and for everything to be made right. So let's look at this verse that I talked about. Ultimately, the curse over creation is what's causing this due to our sin. This was the punishment for our sin. But I want to read where this curse actually gets lifted. In Revelation 22, 1-3, says, "And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of the street, and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him." So I believe this is talking about that Genesis 3 curse. After Adam and Eve sinned and fell, the curse that he put upon creation, this is when it ultimately is reversed. And we don't want to confuse it with, it does talk in Galatians that he's broke the curse of the law and things like that, but that's not what I'm talking about. That is absolutely, that's been broken, but this is talking about the fact that we still get sick, that we still die, that there's pain, there's suffering, injustice, all of these things on the earth due to sin and death that is on the earth. So we long for that to be restored back to where we will live forever. There will be no more sickness, no more pain, no more death. So letter B, we mourn over the depravity of our flesh, the sinfulness, our double-mindedness, our failures, and our lack of follow-through in our pursuit of the Lord. Mourning is the only proper and humble response to what we see in ourselves. In his mercy and kindness, the Lord uses this mourning to lead us to repentance. So James 4 says here, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up." So letter C, this type of mourning that we see James describing here is rare, precious, and powerful, and it comes by spending time with the Lord, this idea of drawing near. As we draw near to him, he will expose what's really there, but his desire isn't just to leave you that way, to expose it so that he can cleanse it, so that he can remove it, so that he can lead you out of that place and lead you to repentance. Ultimately, repentance is such a beautiful gift. It's a word that we don't say as often in the church as we used to, but it is a beautiful thing that actually leads to joy. And this mourning leads to that. This mourning is God's gift to us and leads us to long for more of him in this age and to long for his coming when we will no longer battle with our weakness and sin. This is one of many things to look forward to when the Lord returns, is that we will no longer sin. We won't have wrong motives. Let alone, I mean, yeah, we can think about all the other people in our lives who maybe have had wrong motives or sinned against us, but like your own heart will be pure. You won't have to wrestle against yourself like, am I doing this for the right reason? Am I doing this to get something out of this person? Even the small little things that our hearts will be, all of that stuff will be removed, and there will be no more sin. And this is something we want to look forward to. Letter D, we also mourn because of what we see happening in our region, in our nation, or in the world. We see all the injustice, rebellion, and lawlessness, and it should grieve us deeply. The Lord uses this type of mourning to lead us into intercession. So, I mean, obviously current events, like we talked about the wars already, the wars in Israel, Ukraine, but even huge things like abortion and human trafficking, all these different things, it should deeply grieve us. But the right response to that is what we do here at the House of Prayer, as we go to intercession and we ask the Lord to break in these different areas. That's what the mourning should lead to. We shouldn't just say, oh, that's too bad. You know, we should actually come now and pray for all these different things that are happening across the earth. Similar to, this is what Isaiah is doing here. Isaiah 6 says, he said, so I said, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. So he was grieving in the state of Israel at the time. Letter E, the only other time that Jesus uses this word mourn is in Matthew 9, when he instructs them to mourn for the bridegroom who has gone away for a time. We mourn because the bridegroom is not here right now, and we long for him to come back and make the wrong things right again. And I believe this mourning for the bridegroom to return encompasses all these other types of mourning, that ultimately all those different things that we're mourning, that's when they get dealt with, and that's when this comfort comes, and when there's an end to the suffering, whether it's just your personal stuff, whether it's things across the world, different issues, is dealt with when the bridegroom comes. Oh, my pages got way out of order. Okay. So here's the verse I was referring to where he talks about mourning for the bridegroom. Jesus said to them, can the friends of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. So letter F. We can see in that passage and others that fasting is also connected to mourning. Fasting is choosing to deny ourselves lesser comforts, specifically food, to remind ourselves that all our comfort is found in the Lord, some in this age, but ultimately in the age to come. Fasting is self-humiliation and helps you become more aware of your lack and your great need of the Lord now, and makes you ache for a day when there will be no more mourning and pain. And these ideas of fasting and mourning are often connected throughout the Bible, like in this verse here. It says, now, therefore, turn to me with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Fasting actually aids us to be able to mourn. Like the way we physically feel, that ache that you feel, anyone who's ever fasted, like I've never been more hungry for lunch at lunchtime than the first day of a fast. Like I wouldn't have been that hungry if it wasn't a fasting day, but now that I'm fasting, you know, your body knows what's going on, or your mind does, and it just responds in weird ways. But all the different ways that you feel, the weakness, the pain that you endure in fasting, all that is actually to lead us, to show us really the state of where we're at, and to mourn, to humble ourselves, and to remind us that things aren't okay, that it's like a picture pointing towards something else. Letter G, here's the song. You guys, anyone that knows me knows this is one of my favorite songs that I already referenced. So John Thurlow, who I do like, by the way. Some people here used to make fun of me. They thought I didn't like John Thurlow for some reason. But he has some great songs. And this one called Things Are Not Okay beautifully describes mourning for the bridegroom. So I'll just read some of the lyrics really quick. It says, there is coming a day when the bridegroom is taken away. In that day they will mourn. In that day they will fast. Things as they are not okay. When someone is missing, when someone is absent. Things are not okay right now, and they won't be till you come back. And I'll stay here and mourn for you, stay here and fast for you, stay here and watch for you, stay here and wait for you, and I will embrace the ache of a lovesick heart. So again, we need this ache, this simple truth of longing for the Lord to return. We don't want to get comfortable with the way things are. It's really easy to just, not think about it and just, like, sometimes if you guys ever hear me sing in here, I'll sing about, like, I don't want to, I've said it in lots of different ways, kind of like make a tent and make this my home. Like, oh, just camp out in this present age and think that this is my home. I'm just going to build something now in this age. It's like, no, I want to understand that I'm a sojourner, that I'm wandering, that this is not the end destination. And I want to keep my eyes on the prize of the Lord's return and everything that's coming. We don't want to settle in and kind of almost like turn a blind eye to all the things that are wrong in the earth right now. We actually want to see things as they are, and we want to grieve, and we want to mourn rightly what we see in ourselves and around us. So letter H. This mourning is very closely related to the groaning of Romans 8. So we groan along with creation, longing for the removal of the Genesis 3 curse, for the resurrection of our bodies and the restoration of all creation. So let's read this, and then I actually want to go to Genesis 3 after this for a minute. But let's read this passage, Romans 8. It says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope." We're going to come back to that phrase in a minute. Of him who subjected it in hope. "Because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body." So this groaning is the same idea. We're groaning and longing for things to be made right, for the redemption of our body, for the restoration of creation, for everything that has been messed up due to sin. We want to see that reversed. So let's actually turn to Genesis 3. I want to just look at this. Some of this will be a review. We go over some of this stuff in biblical worldview, but I love talking about this. So right in the middle of the curse, which really starts around verse 14, he speaks to the serpent, he speaks to the woman, he speaks to Adam. But right in the middle of it, so that back to that phrase in Romans 8 where he says, "Him who subjected it in hope." So God is actually the one who subjected creation. God is the one who cursed creation. He told them, if you eat of that fruit, if you sin against me, you will die. Like Adam and Eve sinned, but God gave the righteous punishment to them of what he said he was going to do. But I love that it says he subjected it in hope. Like right in the middle of the curse, in the middle of him proclaiming that everything's about to start falling apart and you are going to die, in the middle of that, he is already prophesying the hope of what's to come. Like he doesn't even wait until like a few years later. Like right in the midst of it, he is telling them about the hope, which we see in Genesis 3:15, which is called the proto-evangelion or evangelium, which means the first gospel. We see right in the middle of the curse, it says there, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. And he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So that last part, the bruising of the head, bruising of the heel. Bruising of the heel is speaking of when Satan bruised Jesus, speaking of the cross. But the bruising, or some translations say the crushing of the head, is talking about the day that Jesus will come back and will crush the serpent, which is Satan. So already in there, he is promising a day where the enemy will be crushed and where all of this stuff will be removed. The curse that he's even giving right then. He doesn't unpack it. We see many more verses after this that unpack it, but I believe Adam and Eve understood that like when that man comes, when that seed comes from Eve, he's going to let us back into Eden. He's going to let us back into the garden, let us back into the way things used to be. And you see that actually later. We're not going to read through all of this, but let's actually go down to verse 19. So this is really where he's telling Adam again about the fact that he's going to die. In verse 19, he tells Adam, "In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return." So he's already telling them, like, you are going to die. Death is going to start happening. People are going to go back to the dust where I created them from. But what I love, and this I owe this to Danny. Danny taught me this, and she gets excited about this as well. How many people in the room here did not, or you don't have to raise your hand, I did not know this, that, do you know that Eve was not named Eve in the beginning? Her name was woman. Like, it wasn't Adam and Eve. It was Adam, and then she never had a name besides woman, which just means like came out of the man. And Adam actually prophetically renames her here. Right after the curse, he renames her Eve, which means mother of like all the living. And I believe what he's saying, he's just been told that a man, like from her seed, from their line, is going to come and is going to crush the enemy and is going to let them back in and lead back to this, to life, to everlasting life, and reverse what's just happened. So that's what you see there in verse 20. It says, Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. And I just thought it was really interesting to see, just to remind us again, that even when God cursed creation, like it says in Romans 8, he subjected it in hope. Like there is actually hope. Even though we are under the curse right now, that there is hope coming, that there is a day coming, that a man is coming back that will reverse it completely. And we will live forever once again, and things will return back to the way they were, plus some. It'll be like it was in the Garden of Eden, plus the knowledge of the cross, plus being able to sing, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain." Like we have even more, but back to that quality of life that we were originally intended for. So let's keep going. Another verse here, speaking about this groaning. It says, "For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed with our habitation which is from heaven. If indeed, having been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up by life." So again, is this longing, like Paul calls it, like his body of death, this longing for the resurrection, longing for things not to be the way that they are right now, longing for the resurrection. Give me 1 second. Another thing I wanted to mention too is like the things, like even things that have been happening like around here, like with Gustavo's passing, like these are reasons to mourn. You know what I mean? Like it is good and healthy to mourn. Like when these things like this happen, and it shocked our community, and we prayed and all these things, like we should mourn. We don't have to have the answers. We don't have to understand what's happening exactly, but that should lead us to have this mourning and this longing for death to be reversed. Like death is ugly. Like we should not be able to just go casually through life and just thinking like this is what evolution lies to us, right? And says death is normal, death is a part of life. But then when it hits you, you're like, death is awful. Like the sting of death. Like we of course have hope and we long for the resurrection. But we should look out at the way things are and just seeing people dying all around us, different tragedies, and it really should lead us to grieve. And I thought of another story as well. I don't think my kids are in here, but when we first adopted our kids, so for those of you who don't know, we adopted our kids because their mother, who was really their grandmother, had passed away. She was the one that was their guardian, that she had adopted them. When she passed away, we stepped up and we adopted these kids. But I remember after, so Nathaniel's really expressive. So he would say things like we would, I'm probably gonna cry. We'd pass cemeteries, and he would say things. This is like right after his mom passed. He would talk about he's like, I missed my mom. And he would just say like under his breath, like, I hate death. Like it was so profound. That is how we should respond. Like the Bible calls death like the final enemy to be destroyed. And sometimes we're so casual about it and like This is the great lie of evolution, right? Like, oh, you need death to progress things. Like, but even from, and this is when he was like 8 years old, and he would be able to express so well. I'm like, I do hate death too, buddy. You know, trying to have a conversation with him at that point. But that is, like, when different things happen to us, like, it is right and good to grieve and to mourn in that way. And we should not be okay with death, and we shouldn't pass it off as just a normal part of life. This is not, like, we were not designed to die. This was not God's plan for creation. This actually shows us what death and all of the craziness happening in our world shows us how ugly sin is, because sin is actually what led to this. Sin is what led to this, all the horrible things that are happening in the earth. So it is good and right to mourn. But anyways, all that, then going to mourning, though, even though there is much to mourn about, it does not exclude joy from our lives. It's like what does Benny call it? A paradox, kind of, that like in the midst of mourning, we actually can still have tremendous joy. You don't have to pick a side. You don't have to be like, well, something bad happened, so I'm just gonna mourn and I'm just gonna be sad all the time. I'm nothing good to celebrate. It's like, no, you want to grieve the bad things that are happening, but you want to have joy because the Lord is coming back, and it's not always going to be this way. I think it's actually the primary source of where we can get joy from, is seeing the end of the story and seeing where we're actually heading. So longing and aching for what is coming leads to immense joy as we anticipate the coming day where we shall be comforted fully. There's a day he is going to wipe every tear from our eyes. And I love this phrase, is there is an appointed end to the suffering of this present age. Like, there is a day and an hour. It says even Jesus doesn't know it, but the Father knows it, that there is a day coming when suffering will end. Every injustice that you can imagine right now will come to an end. There is a prophesied day coming, and this we can look to with joy. We will be glorified and resurrected, and will never sin again. In this age, we are lovesick and homesick, but there is joy mingled in, because we know it's just a little while longer until Jesus returns, and we will be with the one we love in the home he has made for us. So again, this longing should be the main like driver of joy. So sometimes I've had people come up to me before and be like, oh, like they think I'm sad all the time because I'm crying about the Lord coming back. Like, when I'm crying up here, singing, like making a mess of myself, singing about Jesus coming back, I'm actually filled with so much joy as I'm doing that. So don't be concerned about me. That's actually a good thing. You should be like, Keith's doing all right if there's tears just flowing down everywhere and he needs a tissue. That's a good thing. But it's both, right? I'm like mourning and I'm joyful because I know it's not always going to be this way. And this is really where we should be. We shouldn't be ignoring either side of it. We shouldn't be trying to pretend like things are okay, but we should also be looking to what's coming as well. So again, in the picture, like we all know, like the picture of a bride preparing for her wedding. Like, even though she's longing for that day that's coming, there is so much joy in the preparation and looking forward to that day and all the time and care that a bride puts into her wedding. This is what we should be doing as we wait. And it should be a joyful waiting, not just a passive waiting. And yeah. So here's the verse I was talking about just a little while longer. It comes from Hebrews 10:37. It says, "For yet a little while, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry." So, and I believe we need to remind ourselves of this hope more often than we do. I mean, obviously in the house of prayer, we are great at talking about the Lord's return, but like, I think regularly in just different ways to just remind yourself and to sing about it, to think about the Lord's return and all the hope that we have. Really, especially honestly, when you're down in the dumps or you're battling depression or different things, whatever it is that you're not feeling right, like this should be a great source of joy that you should look to in those different times. So I would encourage us in that to mourn, but to mourn with longing, to mourn with joy, with lovesickness, because things will not always be this way. If we had no hope that was coming, it would just be mourning. We would just grieve everything that's happening. This is what the world, honestly, some people probably, most people in the world are just kind of pretending like things aren't bad. But those that see it, you mourn, but without any hope. you just look out at the world and you're like, all these wars are happening, all this injustice is happening, and we have no promise. They have no hope of what's coming. But praise God that we know that things are not always going to be this way. So let's keep moving on. So that's the idea of mourning. So I want us to be a people that mourn. I want to be a person that mourns for the Lord's return. Let's go to blessed are the meek. So blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So letter A, the Greek word translated meek is defined as mildness of disposition, gentleness of spirit, or meekness. Blue Letter Bible also adds this description. I'm just going to read it. It says, meekness towards God is that disposition of spirit in which we accept his dealings with us as good, and therefore without disputing or resisting. In the Old Testament, the meek are those wholly relying on God rather than their own strength to defend against injustice. Thus, meekness towards evil people means knowing God is permitting the injuries they inflict, that he is using them to purify his elect, and that he will deliver his elect in his time. Gentleness or meekness is the opposite to self-assertiveness and self-interest. It stems from trust in God's goodness and control over the situation. The gentle person is not occupied with self at all. And that's what we're gonna talk about that a lot. This is a work of the Holy Spirit, not of the human will. And that Galatians 5:23 there is talking about the fruit of the Spirit. But I think it actually is the last two in the list, is gentleness and self-control, which goes, I would say those two things have a lot to do with meekness. This idea of not being preoccupied with ourselves. And in a manner of speaking, like having control over our selfishness. So letter B, at other times when this same Greek word is used in the New Testament, it gets translated as gentle or as lowly. And one other definition I have heard for meekness, you may have heard as well, is this idea of restrained strength. So like you have strength, or you might have the ability to do certain things, but you actually choose not to for the sake of loving your brother or in different situations. So it's kind of like or strength under control, this idea like that. Choosing not to use your strength for your own purposes or to defend yourself. So there's times where like you could defend yourself, but you choose not to. Whatever it is, maybe somebody wronged you, I don't know, overcharged you for something, and you could just freak out about it, and there's times where the Lord might just tell you, no, just let him do it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you have to be a doormat all the time, but there's different times. Being meek doesn't mean you're always going after defending yourself and going after all these different things like that. So these verses after are showing the other times where it's used as a different word. So lowly, where it's talking about, I'll just read it. Tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you lowly and sitting on a donkey, on a colt of the foal of a donkey, when Jesus was coming into Jerusalem. In 1 Peter 3, again, there at the end it talks about the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. So all of that word, lowly and gentle, is the exact same Greek word that gets translated meekness as well. Top of page 4. So poverty of spirit, or being poor in spirit, which we talked about last week, and meekness, they're very closely related, but they have one main distinction. So poverty of spirit involves the awareness of our lack before God and our great need for his resources, but meekness involves awareness of our lack before people and our indebtedness to God for the resources that he gave us and his ownership of them. Poor in spirit talks about the way we view ourselves in relation to God, and meekness is the way we view ourselves in relation to people and how we interact with people. And this changes how we use what he gives us. And having this idea, I forget where it's at, where it says, freely we have received, freely we give. Like understanding that everything that we have has come from the Lord. But letter D, unfortunately, our default mindset, apart from the Holy Spirit's work in us, is to see our resources, things like our gifting, our money, position, authority, etc., as mostly belonging to us, and being the fruit of our dedication and hard work. Like, we often fall into this trap. Without the Lord's help, everything that's going on in my life is because of what I did. Like, not realizing, like, the Lord has empowered you. Anything that you have in this life, ministry, work things, money, whatever it is that you have, is that it's actually come from the Lord, that the Lord's empowered you to have that. And this is such a lie that we think it's just because of our dedication and hard work and not the Lord actually providing for us. Letter E, just to be clear, walking in meekness is not the same as the personality trait of timidity. Or this idea of being like overly shy and like, oh, I'm just afraid of everybody. You know, like, that's not what meekness means. Meekness doesn't mean that you're like that. That's rooted in like fear of man and low self-esteem. Meekness is not, you actually have a very high view. You see how the Lord sees you, and you're very thankful for everything that he's given you, so you gladly give it to others and don't claim everything for yourself. So meekness is submitting to the grace God gives us to walk free from self-centeredness. And this is really the key. Like, self-centeredness would be the very opposite of meekness. And the Lord empowers us to walk free from that. And it's actually, as you grow in this, it is so freeing. Like, living for yourself actually is the greatest, like, robber of your joy. Like, when you actually can get outside of yourself and focus all of your life on the Lord and other people, that's actually where joy comes from. When you just make it all about you and what you can do for yourself, and you see other people as, how can that person benefit me, and how can I advance here and do that, it doesn't lead to any joy. We weren't designed that way. So meekness, we want to find freedom from that self-centeredness and letting the Lord lead us to that, to help us walk free from it. Without meekness, we normally think that we deserve better treatment from God and people in our circumstances. Or in other words, we walk around filled with a spirit of entitlement. Like, we just, and it could be in subtle ways too. And a lot of this doesn't mean you're saying it necessarily out loud. These could be thoughts in your head, like, oh, I deserved that. Why didn't I get to do that thing? You know, that, whether it's in ministry or it could be even at work, different things like that, different promotions. Oh, I should have got the promotion instead of them. You know, like, why am I not getting this thing? And we need to understand that, like, really, we need to have back to that idea of poor in spirit before, like, the idea that we really deserve nothing. Like, you know, the only thing each one of us in this room actually deserves, a lake of fire, because of our sin. So the fact that we get not only salvation and all the blessings the Lord gives us now in this age, like, everything we get is such an amazing blessing. Like, we should all be getting up and running around this room celebrating everything that we get, because we're not getting what we deserve. We deserve eternal punishment for the way that we've treated the Lord in our sin, and yet we still, like, think, I deserve this other thing, because I did this hard work for you, Lord. You should give me this ministry position, or you should give me this promotion. I worked so hard. I gave so much money away. The preacher told me if I gave this money away, you would give me this. Like, we have all these different things that we think we deserve, and that is the complete opposite of what meekness is. So Philippians 2 here says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. And this is really, that word lowliness, again, is that same idea of meekness and favoring others over yourself. Letter F. The essence of meekness is rooted in who we are preoccupied with. It's not ourselves. The meek are preoccupied with Jesus as their source and owner of everything that they possess. Therefore, they are grateful for what they have, and that's the key. This idea goes very hand in hand with this idea of being grateful and thanksgiving, and they use it with a servant spirit and with generosity. By contrast, apart from the work of the Spirit in our lives, we are preoccupied with ourselves and with the sense that we deserve more honor, more money, and favor than we receive. This results in a sense of entitlement that complains and demands more privileges and honor because of how highly we view our gifting, accomplishments, dedication, or position. And I know I've been guilty of many of these things I'm talking about. I'm hoping a lot of this hits home. I want the Lord to convict us of so many times we do this, and a lot of times it's really subtle ways. That it might be just a thought that you think. You might not tell your neighbor, but you're like, I should have got that thing, and why did they get it? Well, it could be in small little areas too. It doesn't necessarily mean a huge thing. Letter G, if we see everything we have received as a gift of grace, then we will not view it with a boastful or proud attitude. We display pride when we complain. Actually, let me pause right there. We were this idea of complaining came up in one of our home groups. There's a verse in Philippians 2:14. It says, "Do all things without complaining." That was a very convicting verse. I remember, it hit me. Obviously, we know that verse, but how often do we complain about so many things, small things, big things, whatever it is that fights against the idea of being meek. But here it says, when we complain about how small the measure of blessing or praise we receive, or even if it's internal, you're just like, man, I really wish that person would have said, you sang really good today. And small side note, should I even go on that? If anyone ever does compliment you, and it is good for people to compliment you and to praise you for different things that you do, all you need to say, the most meek way to respond, is just to say thank you. Because when you say this, everyone in the room has probably been guilty of this. Say someone came up to me and was like, oh, Keith, you sang really great. And I'm like, no, did you? I missed a few notes. I kind of messed up. I was really nasally tonight. What am I actually asking them to do? To compliment me again. It actually, even though it might sound really humble, I'm actually being not humble at all. I'm like, please tell me again how awesome I am. And then when you say that, I'm going to say something else bad about myself, so you can just keep laying it on. It's actually really annoying, too. When someone tells you something nice, even if you don't believe it, just say thank you. Don't mention the bad notes that you hit and all those different things. Just receive it. And it's okay to receive it. You don't have to be like, oh, it was all the Lord, it was all the Lord. You can just say thank you. You can give credit to the Lord, too. I'm not saying you can't do that, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Sometimes people are over the top, it was all the Lord. You know what I mean? It had nothing to do with anything I did. It's just say thank you. That is the meek response when someone praises you. Where was I? Okay, so when we also show our pride, this is the middle of G, by using our gifting, position, or authority, or money as if it was mostly ours. Instead, we should view these things as being a gracious stewardship from God, and thus use them with a servant spirit. Those not operating in meekness may boast and think things like, how dare someone overlook or resist one as gifted, dedicated, and deserving as I am? And I'll share a little story. Hopefully Danny's okay with this. Too late, because I'm sharing it. And you may not have been as guilty of this as I am, so you don't have to take credit for what I'm about to say about us. But there was a time when we were, this is like in college, or right after college. So me and Danny did a lot of youth ministry. So we were always the way we'd be second in command at different youth groups, or at the youth group that we were at. So we would come, there would be a youth pastor, but we would do a lot of the leadership roles. I would lead worship, Danny would lead things. And at this one church, I think it actually happened twice. Me and Danny are currently, as we're leading, or as we're in our position, we're going to school for ministry. I'm getting a pastoral ministry degree, Danny's getting a missions degree, and twice while we were there, another person, a youth pastor would leave for whatever reason, and they would pick somebody else. Me and Danny were like, of course they should choose us. We're the ones in ministry school training to do this, and they would pick somebody else. And not just somebody else who was a relatively new believer compared to us. And we were I don't know about you, but I was so filled with entitlement and just why are you picking this makes no sense. So by the way, I'm obviously sharing what not to be like. And it happened again a second time at the same church, but the Lord really used it to bring a humbling to me, to show like actually the ugliness in my heart that he probably did it on purpose just to teach me a lesson, and of course other reasons as well, but to humble us. And actually, I realized later, I'm like, because I responded that way, it actually showed that I wasn't fit to have that position anyways, because my heart was in that bad place of just like thinking I deserved it just because of a degree or because of something that I thought I deserved it for. So just to give a personal example there, that was not a very meek way to act. I should have celebrated, whoever that they chose to appoint and served alongside of them without having any of those thoughts or feelings like that. Right. Thanks, Jim. All right, let me read this verse. So 2 Corinthians 4:7 says, "For who makes you differ from another, and what do you have that you did not receive? Now, if you did indeed receive it, why do you boast as if you had not received it?" Again, we boast about things all the time that was all the Lord's doing, not ours. And again, it says, "Let him who boast in the Lord." Paul says also in Galatians, like, boast only in the cross, like in Jesus Christ and him crucified. These are the only things we should be boasting in, not in ourselves or our great gifting, because all of that came from the Lord anyways. Letter H, with a wrong view of our gifting or lack of gifting, position or lack of position, wealth or lack of wealth, we lack gratitude and thus can easily become offended when we are overlooked or resisted. The meek know that they deserve God's discipline much more than any measure of blessing that he has given them before people. The meek embrace important tasks or menial tasks with gratitude. That gratitude is key. I underlined it here in my notes. Like, this is really, if you want to see someone displaying it, it's someone who is just filled with thanksgiving. You ask them to take out the trash, and they joyfully say, yes, I go do it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go do these menial tasks or whatever it is that you ask them to do, and they just do it with thanksgiving. They're just so thankful to do anything for other people and for the Lord, knowing that they are getting more than they deserve from God. The meek refuse to manipulate or exert pressure on people to promote them. They're okay with just being obedient to the Lord. If people want to promote me, great. If they don't, great. Anything the Lord wants me to do in this life, I want to be obedient, and I don't want to be concerned about different positions. If the Lord wants me to have something, he'll make it happen. I don't have to make it happen. I don't have to. And it also comes from a real big arrogance on our part, too, to think that we know what's best. Like, God, this would be the best place for you to use me, that we know better than him because of X, Y, and Z. I should have this position or this authority or this thing. The Lord knows better than we do. Luke 17, it's a humbling verse. It says, "Which of you, having a servant plowing or tending sheep, will say to him, when he has come in from the field, 'Come at once and sit down to eat'? But will he not rather say to him, 'Prepare something for my supper, gird yourself, and serve me till I have eaten and drunk, and afterward you will eat and drink'? Does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I think not. So likewise you, when you have done all those things which you are commanded, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have done what was our duty to do.'" So again, like, don't just do things for the Lord and then be like, "All right, now what are you going to do for me?" You know what I mean? I came into the prayer room, I worship led this set, I did this thing, whatever it is. I evangelized for you, thinking that like now he owes us something. He doesn't owe us anything. All those things that we do for him is because that's what he's told us to do. It's out of obedience and thanksgiving is the reason why we serve. It's never to earn anything back. It's never to pay back, like, "Oh, you did the cross, and I did all these things." So, no, like, it's never a payment. We don't ever pay back what the Lord has done for us. It's just simple thank yous. All the different things that we do for the Lord are just should be a showing of our gratitude for what he's done. Letter I. We have much freedom in Christ, but when we have a meek spirit, we use that freedom to serve our brothers and sisters, not to just do what we want. Even though we have the freedom to do many things, we choose not to do some of those things, even if they aren't sinful, for the sake of our brother. And this is huge. I'm not going to get into too many examples, but just really in the body of Christ, we really need to be focusing on this idea of not flaunting our freedoms. Like, everyone has different convictions. If I find out someone has a different conviction than, like, I'm trying to think of a silly illustration. Like, say someone's like, I feel convicted not to watch this TV show. You know what I mean? But I feel like it's totally fine. Like, me, like, trying to convince them the show's okay, or when they come over to my house, putting the show on would be really rude. You know what I mean? And not meek. But people do this with other things as well, and they flaunt their freedoms. Like, maybe they have a different conviction than you do. It's really not appropriate. It's not loving. So meekness is saying, I'm going to choose not to do the things, even some of the things that I think are okay, to love my brother and sister. And this is really the attitude we should have. Not to just be like, well, I have freedom in Christ, brother, so I'm going to do this whether you like it or not. Like, that is terrible. And that's what Paul is talking about here when he says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. So what he's saying is we're to use our freedom to bless other people, to serve other people, not to just be like so excited that we have this freedom and we're just going to do whatever we want with it. It's you're using that freedom to actually serve your brothers and sisters. So with our last little bit here, we're actually going to look at the back half of this verse, and then we'll wrap up. So we're going to look at what it says, the promise that is given to the meek. So it actually says that they shall inherit the earth. So I wanted to unpack that phrase for us, more so than I have in some of the other ones, just so we understand, at least from my perspective, what I believe Jesus was trying to teach us here. So, letter A, the promise of reward that Jesus gives us for being meek is that we will inherit the earth. The phrase, they shall inherit the earth, is found in the Old Testament and is clearly a promise of reward for the future, connected to the covenants and the promises to Israel. Interestingly, almost the entire verse of Matthew 5:5 is a direct quote from Psalm 37. This was not a new idea Jesus was presenting to them. We mentioned that briefly last week too. Like, a lot of times we think that Jesus' teaching was so revolutionary and he was coming up with all these new ideas. He's mostly just reaffirming what the Old Testament already said. And in this case, he's directly quoting it. Psalm 37:11 says, "But the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace." So Jesus is quoting directly there from the Psalms. Letter B, all too often, this is what I was just talking about, the Gentile church presents Jesus' teaching in the New Testament in a way that makes it seem like it's all new teaching and that the storyline was dramatically changed by Jesus' first coming. This could not be further from the truth. Jesus quotes and alludes to the Old Testament many times and only confirms and clarifies the storyline of the Old Testament. He actually knows that people might think that he's changing the storyline of the Old Testament, so he actually clarifies for us in the Sermon on the Mount that this is absolutely not true. So if you look on page 6, and we're not going to unpack this whole phrase. You could probably do a whole teaching on this as well. There's a lot in here, but whereas he says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law and prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." So in nowhere in there, he's saying, I did not come to destroy. Like, I'm not coming to destroy the hope of the law and the prophets. All the different things he came to fulfill. He's not saying, forget about all of that. We're going to move on to this new thing that I'm doing. And this is where, I'm not going to go real long into this. Like, the thing that did change, yes, we know the Mosaic covenant, the law, that has been superseded, if you will, or is, what does it call it in Hebrews? What's the word? Where it says it's obsolete under the new covenant. But that doesn't mean the Old Testament is obsolete. Like, the rest of the Old Testament and the hope and everything that's prophesied is absolutely relevant and still important and hasn't been changed. Just the means in which we are able to acquire our salvation and atonement and being right with God is changed because of the cross and everything Jesus offers to us. Letter C, several other times in the Old Testament, the idea of inheriting the earth is mentioned. The word translated earth in the New Testament, in both the New Testament, I think it's gi, something like that in Greek, and in the Old Testament it's eretz in Hebrew, can also mean land. Many times in the Old Testament, eretz is used to speak of the land promised to Israel. Let us look at these Old Testament verses and see what exactly is meant by this phrase. And some of your translations, there aren't many, some of them actually say they shall inherit the land in Matthew 5. I don't know if it's the main ones, but I've seen that before in other translations instead of saying inherit the earth. So let's look at these verses that say these similar words. So Psalm 37, there's a lot in that chapter. It says, "For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall be no more. Indeed, you will look carefully for his place, but it shall be no more. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace." And then again, down later in Psalm 37, 34, it says, "Wait on the Lord, and keep his way, and he shall exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you shall see it." And what's interesting, if you look at those two verses in the exact same chapter, the same word, eretz, is being used for earth and land. They're used like interchangeably all throughout. That can mean both. And we're going to look at that more as we continue to go here. But another thing that stuck out to me is where both of these verses talk about waiting on the Lord. And this is something that the Lord's really been speaking to me about recently, that really a big part of what we are actually called to do right now as believers in this present age is waiting. Like we are called to wait, and what Jesus tells us to do, like in the Sermon on the Mount, is how do you live as you wait? Because there's much we are waiting for. And much of the corruption of theology comes actually from impatience and from wishing that we didn't have to wait so that will change things. But we're actually called to wait, but it's what do you do as you wait? Talking about how do you witness as you wait? How do you live? You humble yourself as you wait. But to really embrace the fact that in this age, we are waiting. Like we are waiting for that day that he returns. And you're pointing, but it's not a passive waiting. So it doesn't mean you just sit around and do nothing. I'm not saying that. It's very much an active waiting. You witness of the gospel and what's coming. But that's the waiting that I see here in Psalm 37, is that we're waiting on the Lord for him to come, for him to restore the earth, and for that day that all these covenants will be fulfilled. And then a couple other verses here. Psalm 25 says, "Who is the man who fears the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way he chooses. He himself shall dwell in prosperity, and his descendants shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with those who fear him, and he will show them his covenant." So again, the idea of inherit the earth is talking about, is tied to the covenants there as well. And last one, again from Psalm 69, "For God will save Zion and build the cities of Judah, that they may dwell there and possess it. Also the descendants of his servants shall inherit it, and those who love his name shall dwell in it." So letter D. So just from looking at these few verses from the Psalms, the meaning of this phrase becomes much easier to interpret. In some of these passages, it references the wicked or the evil being cut off at the same time as the righteous inheriting the earth or the land. This is clearly speaking of the day of the Lord, when Israel's enemies will be finally removed, and she shall be able to dwell in the land in peace. Letter E, the Abrahamic covenant is also very important in understanding this phrase, where God first promised and prophesied giving his people the specific land to dwell in forever. We don't have to read all of these verses, but all of these verses talk about the land and everything that was promised to Israel. So Genesis 12 is the first one. It says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and will curse those who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.'" So also just all the times it says land and it's underlined in all these verses, every single one of those is the exact same Hebrew word. They're all the same word, eretz. The same ones from Psalm 37. The same thing that Jesus, I believe, is referencing as he's quoting Psalm 37. We can go to the next page. We'll just skip that one and go to Genesis 15. It says, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it." Genesis 17:8 says, "I'll give you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, and as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God." So an F there. So I believe this is the same land that Jesus is referring to in Matthew 5:5. That he will come and restore the land back to Israel. And as we see in Genesis 12, all the nations will be blessed through this restoration as well. We are grafted into Israel's hope and get the blessings as well. Jesus' statement that the meek will inherit the earth is not disconnected from the storyline, but rather he is just reaffirming what the Old Testament says and prophesies. He will vindicate the righteous and will remove their enemies and let them dwell in their land in peace. This will all happen on a very specific time in the future, the glorious day of the Lord. The letter G, to bring us all full circle here, is that it's interesting that the word that gets translated earth can also mean land, because it's actually both. So when I'm saying like we'll inherit the earth, it's like, why is it earth or land? All of it's connected together. Because the story revolves around God redeeming that very specific land of Israel, but one of the effects of that is that all of the earth and all the nations is redeemed and restored as well. There will be a new Jerusalem and a new earth. And Israel or Jerusalem is the governmental center of Jesus' coming kingdom, and going out from there, he will restore the whole earth. So from that land, and because of all the covenants, from that land, blessing and restoration goes forth to the rest of the earth. So like, is it talking about Israel or is it talking about the whole world, the whole earth? Yes. I believe it's talking about both. That when the land and when the covenants are fulfilled, it actually will affect the entire earth. And you see that in the Abrahamic covenant. It talks about all, like the nations of the earth will be blessed. But he's chosen a specific way to do it through the nation of Israel. So just to give us a bigger picture, it's so easy just to read, the meek shall inherit the earth, and just move on. Like, what does he mean by that? There's so much in that little phrase that I believe he's referring to. He's like, the meek will actually inherit all the blessings of the covenants. They will get to dwell in that land in safety. There will no longer be wars and all the different things that are happening. Many, many blessings come on that day that the land is restored. So a couple of verses here talking about how the nations are blessed from the land. Ezekiel 5:5 says, "Thus says the Lord God, this is Jerusalem. I have set her in the midst of the nations and the countries all around her." So where Israel is located is on purpose. It's to be like the center of the earth, and like all blessing and everything from the Lord is going to come from that place. It'll be the center of the new earth. Then Micah 4 says, "Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow to it. Many nations shall come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between many peoples and rebuke strong nations afar off. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." So as we see here, people are they're coming to Jerusalem to learn from Jesus, and from Zion was where, like, talk about the glory covering the earth. Like, it starts in Jerusalem and goes out from there. The knowledge of God goes forth from there, all these things. So it says inherit the land. It's talking about Israel, and it's talking about the whole earth. Or you can come up, Lizzie. So I want to just call us to respond. Why don't we all go ahead and stand? And just to ask the Lord tonight on these two areas, in mourning and meekness, to ask the Lord to help us to walk in these ways, to really mourn, to think about it, not in this, like that we just overly make a big deal about things, but we really should be mourning the way things are right now. I believe most people actually mourn less than they should. In the West, it's so easy to. We're so concealed from most of the world's troubles that we should really be mourning the way things are right now. That sin is still on the earth. That death is still on the earth. That sickness is still on the earth. There's so many reasons to mourn for the Lord to come back and to restore all things. And then also he's calling us to walk in meekness, to deny ourselves, to get rid of self-centeredness and selfishness from our lives, to use everything that he's given us to bless other people, to not have any entitlement within us, but to really use everything he's given us to serve and to love our brothers and sisters in the Lord. So let me just pray for us. So Father, I thank you for your word. I ask that you would help us to walk in these ways, Lord, that we would be ones who would mourn, Lord, that we would mourn for you, the bridegroom, for you to return, that we would declare that things are not okay right now, and they won't be until that day that you come back, that we would have this lovesick heart, that we would not be content or make peace with the way that things are right now in this present evil age, but that we would have a deep longing within us, a grieving for things to be made right, for you to come back and to restore all things, to make the wrong things right, that there will be an appointed end to the suffering. Lord, let this hope arise within us to know that it really is true. This really is going to happen. There is a day coming when you will make the wrong things right. Let hope arise within us, Lord, even as we see so much to mourn right now, that we would also have joy as we know for sure what is coming. Everything that you've prophesied and said you will do, you will do. So help us to do this, Lord, and help us to also walk in meekness, to deny ourselves, to take up our cross and follow you, or to not walk around with any spirit of entitlement or thinking that we deserve something from you or from others, or that we would just gladly, with a thankful heart, serve you, do what you've called us to do, Lord, just to give you simple devotion, simple obedience, not looking to make a name for ourselves or looking to advance or be promoted or anything, Lord, that we would just simply serve you and serve our brothers and sisters with everything that you've given us. So would you help us to do that? In Jesus' name. What I want us to do just for the last few minutes is just to pray for this for one another. So I just want to invite you guys to get into preferably one-on-one, but I know it might not be even numbers. If you have to have a group of 3, that's okay. And just to pray this, just to pray for grace to walk in this, to grace to mourn, grace to walk in meekness. So find some folks around you. Lizzie might sing some, and let's just close the service just for praying for one another in this way.